Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's launch of the second annual Self-Insured survey. We are going to start in about just a minute. Want to wait for folks to get on, get settled, and we're going to kick this off to launch the survey. We're super excited, so stay with us and we'll start very shortly.
All right. Thank you, Megan. My name's Keith Lemmer, and I'm the CEO of WellNet Healthcare, and welcome to the second annual Self-Funded Survey livecast. It's great to have you all here today, and we do look forward to doing this in person real soon. I know everybody has probably a little Zoom fatigue, but we have taken the time to prepare, I think, some game-changing results. We sent out a survey a couple of weeks ago, and to date, we got almost 500 responses from brokers and advisors and consultants all over the country. And what we've done, WellNet has planted a steadfast stake in the ground, really focusing on high-quality, low-cost group health insurance plans with a focus on self-insurance. We have with us today 4 incredible participants that touch every area of group health insurance. Let me introduce our first panelist. Next slide, please. We've got Hilton Shear, the CFO of Consolidated Credit, a debt consolidation and education organization that is one of the leaders in the space on educating members and having people save as much money as possible on the existing debts that are out there. I know we'll get the slide back up in a moment. In addition, we're joined by Rob Pierce, who is the Regional Vice President of USI in the Mountain region. And Rob is an expert in the self-funded space, educating both clients and members on the value of self-insurance. And we're here with Jeff Maraschino, who is joining us from BevCap. And Jeff has been with BevCap for about 4 years. And prior to that, Aetna, and has a great deal of experience in the self-insurance space and educating people on the value of captives. And then bringing cleanup, we've got Kathy Salmons. Kathy is the Chief Operating Officer of WellNet Healthcare. And prior to joining WellNet, she's got about 10 years experience working in the self-insurance space with a Blue Zone TPA. And Kathy is really focusing on engagement, operations, and making sure that people really understand the value of self-insurance. And also, at times, how do we make it better? So with that, I'm going to ask Megan to cut to the next slide. So the questions we're going to show today, we've picked out, I think, 7 or 8 out of the 20 or so responses that we're going to share around afterwards. The first question, I'm going to direct it to Hilton, if you don't mind. Are there any new discoveries over the past 22 months that you've learned about your organization, Hilton? And you see a variety of answers here in terms of enhancing the benefit offering, emphasis on mental health. What's your take, Hilton?
I think the biggest one has been the whole benefit offering. You know, we're all competing for like a limited resource with employees now. And the thing that we have noticed, salary was always a key component, but it seems like the benefits and of course, health insurance because of the cost has become a much greater one and it being used as a recruitment tool. And, we find now what's happening, you start matching dollars for dollars, but they come back, they say, but they have an insurance plan and it's free, or I pay $20 a month. And that has become, a really bigger component. And it's actually even ended up bringing in more of the C-suite into to be aware of it, because before they dealt with the payroll, and now we are finding that, they want more. And if I had to say, I think there's 2 components. They want good health insurance and they want it cheap.
Absolutely.
First prize to them is not to pay. They want it included as part of their benefit package. So if you have an expensive employee contribution, it has become a much greater problem than ever before.
Yeah, everybody wants it for free. Thanks, Hilton. And Rob, what's your take? What are you seeing from your clients over the past 22 months?
Yeah, we've had a lot of questions around offering more. I think more and more employers are trying to, in the spirit of retaining their key talent, trying to meet their employees where they are and all the needs that they have. The question though for me is when you offer more, have you also helped your employees understand the value of what you're providing? And I've been doing this for 20 years, and I still get a lot of questions about medical insurance, right? The one that we've been offering for the longest period of time. And so if you really want to increase engagement and have the goal of retention, I think you have to really make sure you have a thoughtful process to educate your employees about the value of the benefits that you do offer.
Definitely. And Kathy, what's your take on it? I want to get everybody's opinion before we jump to the next slide. And I think you're on mute.
Just unmuted. Pretty much the same. I think one thing I would add, I think it depends on your employer base, like what type of employees you have. If you have a lot of entry-level employees, then they're really just looking for the cheapest. They want good insurance, but it's really about the cost. As you start to go into different environments, it really depends. They would be more focused on what type of benefits you have to offer, as well as the cost.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. And Jeff, you're doing cleanup. What do you think?
I think because in healthcare, there's no real correlation between cost and quality. And with the lack of transparency, I think it's paramount to Hilton's point that, employers just get creative on finding that balance of the best quality at an affordable cost.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, it's interesting, the feedback that we've seen. I mean, everybody wants to pay less, but they want higher quality. And I think also what we're seeing, I think one of the second responses, right, is people are concerned about hanging on to talent, right? And so, it all comes back to workforce engagement, but ultimately, like, how do we provide the best benefits, highest quality, lowest cost? And maybe that leads us to our next item. What percent of the C-suite executive clients are more engaged in the health insurance plan than they have been before? And so maybe, Jeff, I'm going to flip it back to you. What are you seeing right now? We see, you've got 35% or more are engaged, or actually, I take that back, right? You look at 50% more engaged at the 30% level. So what's your take?
Yeah, I think that's the big struggle that employers have, right? Is what's going to resonate with my population to engage them in the benefits? Because let's face it, in health insurance, it's like a foreign language. We all know it, right? So how do we translate it in their terms? And I'm a personal fan of the value-based designs that are out there. I know there's a lot of different ones out there, but generally speaking, I think money talks, and that's the best place to start.
No, definitely. And Robbie, you see more CEOs and CFOs engaged than ever before?
Yeah, I would say as I look over the last year, especially, it's particularly in finalist meetings where it's the head of HR, and then I've seen more and more of the C-suite participating in those, with a lot of questions around, okay, saving money is important, but how are you going to help us move the needle with our benefits program and make it sustainable and leverage that sustainability to give a better benefits package to our employees to try to keep them more engaged? I mean, that's one question that keeps coming up again and again. How do we engage our employees, especially since many of them are working from home?
No, definitely. And so, Hilton, if you tie that response that Rob shared, and you look at the question about, what method of funding do you believe is in the best interest, for a long-term strategy? I understand Consolidated had been fully insured for many years. What do you think about this? You see 93% of the people saying self-insured is the way to go. What's your take?
I think the overriding thing with health insurance has become contain the cost. And most of us, and I thought there, we just continue to see increasing premiums, having no way to reduce it other than cut benefits. And I think, when we talked about self-insurance, the issue was we could do more. We'd have more data. We could try and control our own destiny, hopefully going forward. Yes, there is a risk attached to it, but I think everybody's got to that stage now where the self-insured, just a fully insured, just hasn't worked for them. We don't see an end. It's just this revolving cost going higher and higher. And I think, that was our issue. We can't sustain this. Where do we go? And that's what our whole discussion to self-insurance. And we had the right advisors that helped us get there in the right way. But I think, long-term, people don't see light at the end of the tunnel if they stay and do what they're doing today.
Yes, Hilton, a lot of people say, that the health insurance system is broken, right? We've got to start from scratch and it's just not working. I mean, my take is that the health insurance system, it works just fine for those that designed it and set it up and to keep their revenue streams intact. And so if you can now work in that system, I mean, Kathy, what's your take on the numbers that you're seeing here? 7% say fully insured is the best way, 93% say self-insured. What do you think?
Well, obviously, just in my own business, what we're doing, I absolutely believe self-insured is the direction to go. And I think it's interesting that you see these results where you see 7% versus 90, 95 or 93%, but you still see surprisingly a number of clients, especially in the in the mid to large group market, that still fall into that fully insured market, that still find it, I think, comfortable, and just haven't yet made the leap, made the investment. And when I say investment, it's an investment of time, of learning. So it's surprising to you see those numbers, but those numbers don't truly reflect, I don't believe, how the population falls.
Oh, great feedback. And thank you, everyone. And maybe Megan, advance to the next slide, if you don't mind, please. And what we're seeing here, this is a repeat of the question from last year, and it's going to come on the screen right now. It says, I believe that working with the BUCAs, the Blues, United, Aetna, Cigna, is in the best interest for my client. And we saw 84% of the folks say false. They do not believe that working with the BUCAs is in the best interest of the client. Jeff, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think, well, it's no secret that employee wages, if you look over the last 10 years, have not kept pace with what's happened with premiums, with deductibles and out-of-pocket expenses for employees. And I think that tells the story. You have to do something different. While it's nice to have the warm and fuzzies of a good brand, if you don't have the proper cost controls in place and someone really getting creative to deliver good quality benefits at an affordable price, then all the warm and fuzzies in the world aren't going to help you.
No doubt. So then, Hilton, why do so many companies remain with the big carriers?
Well, I mean, one thing is with self-insurance, you still can have a big carrier behind you. I think there's something that Kathy said in the prior slide. Everyone might like the idea of going self-insurance. It's nice to have the thought. It's a big leap, and to make that change. And I think, the two go hand in hand. I think people might say that and they might want this self-insurance, but it is a leap. But I think you can make the leap and still have the benefit. I mean, we still have Cigna behind our self-insurance plan.
Terrific. And then Rob, moving on to the next question. It says, how much potential savings do customers typically need to see from their fully insured premiums before they'll even consider self-insurance? Some people say 5%, some people say, gosh, all the way to 20%. What's your take?
Well, I think these questions all align in that I think a lot of people like the idea, but then when it comes to, I think, the competing interests that HR folks and CFOs have today, right? That this health insurance is one thing that they have to manage among many. And so when they start thinking about the potential disruption to employees, the changes that they're going to need to make, the investment in understanding something I think in a little bit at a deeper level than perhaps fully insured, because that it's pretty straightforward. It's plans and rates, and you pay the bill and that's that. I as an advisor would love it if more people would move at the 5 to 10% mark. But I think oftentimes if it's 10% or under, many folks are saying, well, it's not really worth it. All the soft costs and work that it's going to create for me, it's not worth it. So many times, it does need to be north of that 10% number for people to say, okay, let's do this.
And Kathy, if the savings was 2% or 5% or 10%, why do you think it should be worth it?
Because it's an ongoing story. It isn't just about what you're saving that particular year. It's the whole evolution of your plan. It's the whole evolution of your experience for your members. So you have to be able to see the long-term vision. You can't be short-term.
No, definitely. And Hilton, when you all decided to first go self-insurance, I can't remember, what your rates came in at, but what was the ultimate catalyst? Because if I recall, you had a previous broker, a new broker brought you in. Talk about that a little bit, if you don't mind.
Sure. So we had a history of just rates going up and up and up. And as I said, just not going anywhere in the right direction. One of the brokers who I'd been in touch with over the years, who had done right by me many times, introduced us to the concept of self-insurance. Our existing broker, when we spoke to him, he brought in a traditional insurance, fully insured, and he actually came back with a self-insured quote. But I don't know if it was self-serving, but his self-insured quote turned out to be higher than the fully insured. It was very hard to, there was a little bit of, I think, a game being played. The other broker, when we worked with, tried to show us where we would make a savings. And that, in the end, was what happened. But I think one thing, everyone's talking here about a savings. I think I agree with everybody else. I think you want to see some savings. I think 10% is like the minimum. But the one thing that we're all forgetting, if my premium was $2 million currently, and I'm looking at a 20% increase going forward versus going self-insured, and maybe I'm going to keep my premium. So, one is a saving over prior year, but the other one is keeping the cost reduced versus where the premium is going the next year or in subsequent years. So I think, savings is one thing, but keeping it constant as opposed to where the new renewal would have come in. I think we should not lose sight of that. It would be lovely to save on what you've paid in the past, but if you've got a very high renewal coming in, you have to factor that in as well.
No, absolutely. Jeff, what do you think about Hilton's comments?
Yeah, no, I agree. And one thing Kathy said earlier, the focus being on the long term, right? It may be 5% savings one year or 10% the next or something in between, but when you add them all up over, a 5-year snapshot, it's going to be meaningful.
No, absolutely. No, great feedback, everybody. And Megan, would you mind hitting the next question, please? So this is an interesting one, right? What was the deciding factor in clients choosing to go self-funded, right? We see, I think 59% of them said, frustration over the renewal rates that they had seen from the previous year. There's 18, right? Desire for transparency. Then 16% need for information to make informed decisions. And then the last 7% desire to implement solutions based on unique needs of the employees. Talk a little bit about the need for information to make informed decisions. Hilton, would you touch on that first?
The need for information. I think the biggest advantage we have seen from going to self-insurance is the availability of data and on a much more current basis. And once you know what's happening, you can come up with a game plan to change the direction you're going. And I think that is the biggest thing with the self-insurance that I have seen, the knowledge. The whole reason you do this is to have the knowledge to be able to control your destiny. Where are we going wrong? Where are the costs? How do we keep this thing going in the right direction? I think it's, there's two things. Everyone is frustrated over cost, and cost is paramount. We can look at these other nice ideas, but cost is what drives everyone. And self-insurance, if you do self-insurance, you've got to work the data to get to the desired results. If you just go self-insurance but don't analyze or act on the data, then really you might as well just stay where you are. Data, 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 and making informed decisions to go in the right direction with that data. That is the key to everything.
Hilton, can you talk about some of the ways that you've acted on the data? Maybe one or two examples, if you don't mind, not to put you on the spot.
Absolutely. Historically, our biggest issue has been the pharmacy. It just has been a crippling thing over the years. We've got a number of long-term employees with certain issues, and pharmacy has always, every year when we've looked at the renewal, why are we going up? It's pharmacy. So what we were able to do was analyze what pharmacy, why, what were the corrective actions we can take. And paramount, we never wanted to hurt our employees. We didn't want them to feel that they were getting an inferior product. So one of the things that we've been able to do is look at the medicines and see if we could source them elsewhere. And there's a number of things. You can work with employees to go through manufacturers' rebates if they qualify. If it's a very expensive medication and we can source it out of the country or elsewhere in a different manner, that was the biggest thing. And to give you just one example, you could have a medication that costs $20,000 a month, $240,000. If you're able to source that at 60% or 50%, in one example, you've saved $120,000. And my premium is about a $2+ million premium. There alone, in one corrective action, we did it. And what we've done, we didn't hurt the, so we cut back the specialty drugs, but we didn't do it in a way where they got hurt. So what we said, if you need a specialty drug, we don't want to hurt you. We're not going to cover, we'll cover you while we work on an alternative plan. And if we can get an alternative plan to work, we've implemented that and got the savings. If there was no alternative, we didn't want to impact the employee, and then we would keep covering it. But at least, in the old days, we just paid that $20,000 a month, and that's what happened. Now we're saying, you'll never get hurt. We will take care of you, employee, but if we can source it, let's do it. And we've done a couple of those, and we were always, I want to say 35+% of our premiums were pharmaceutical. I believe that number now is going to be just below 20.
Wow. Hilton, those are great examples. And so I'm curious, and I saw Cliff's comment in there. First, Cliff, there's over 500 advisors that have responded to this survey all over the country. And so while, many of the advisors, right, they don't like working with the Blues and United and Cigna, their hands are kind of tied. And so maybe flipping it to Rob for a second, staying on this question, why do you think more C-suite executives are not getting involved the way Hilton is on their health plan?
Why are they not getting involved? I think it's, trying to empower the folks, the CFO, the CHRO, to make the decision that they view as best for their employees and not necessarily get, in their lane, so to speak. But I think what ultimately drives them to get involved at a higher level is this frustration, is the fact that costs keep going up. And it's the lack of transparency. I think you could easily lump those two things together. It's the lack of transparency around why are the costs going up, and then the limited number of options to really change that cost, right? It's negotiate, change plan design, change carriers. That's the strategy on the fully insured side. And that's really not a strategy. And so when folks are ready to actually make a commitment to a strategy and a plan and understand that when you go self-funded, the levers you can pull to move the needle on the cost, many of the things that Hilton mentioned, you are now much more in control of how you react to your plan and any potential cost increases and what you can do than you ever were before on a fully insured basis.
Absolutely. And Hilton touched on this before, and you did as well. Kathy, are all self-funded plans created equal?
Are all self-funded plans created equal?
Yeah.
No, everyone's a unique story.
And why is that? What do you mean?
The people make up the self-funded plan. That's the biggest difference from the whole strategy. So when you're fully insured, you don't know anything. You may go from Aetna to Blue Cross to Cigna year over year, whoever's out there buying the membership to give you your best, what you would consider your best renewal. But the cover changes, but the story's the same. You don't know anything. You don't know what's going on with your population. You have no information to help make any decisions other than what your deductible will be and what your premium will be. When you go self-funded, you roll up your sleeves, you get to know intimately what is your experience, what's going on with your population, and you can do things. There's actionable items that you'll identify that you can do to change the direction of where your plan's going from a cost perspective.
Definitely. And so, Jeff, if you're picking up some of the comments from Hilton and Rob and Kathy, and you're now dealing with the third or fourth biggest expense, what do you zero in on here for your customers, your partners that you work with?
Well, I think they hit on all of them. What I would just tell, the C-suite is the juice is worth the squeeze in healthcare. That's just the best way I can bottom line it. And it's, to Kathy's point, you have to be diligent. Hilton touched on it as well. You got to just stay on it. And while you may save a little bit here, a little bit there, you'll look up and it adds up real quick.
Absolutely. No, thank you. Great responses. And Megan, you mind hitting the next slide, please? This is an interesting item, right? Love this. If clients have shifted to self-funding or adoptive alternative strategies, how often are the outcomes that they're desiring? How often are they actually achieved? And so, right, I think almost 50% of the people said that they're seeing slow adoption and some success. I think I kind of know why, but I'll let you all address this. 37% said timely success and desired outcomes are being achieved. 13, we're seeing minimal improvements, but they're staying the course. And the balance, right? Most clients are choosing to go back to being fully insured. So, Jeff, I'm going to kick it back to you. What do you think about this?
Well, I think it's just what it boils down to in my mind, Keith, is are you jumping in with both feet? Are you really embracing, what your TPA partner is bringing to you in the way of solutions? The more you embrace it, the more success you're going to enjoy.
Rob, what do you think about that?
Yeah, the good news is 83% are seeing some type of success. I think the challenge is you had that slide earlier that said 93% believe self-funded is the better way and 7% say fully insured. Yet, I was just pulling some data on our book of business across the region with over 1,000 clients with 100 employees and above, and it's about 50-50 in terms of fully insured and self-funded. And I think the challenge is that you have a lot of folks that are reluctant to even go from fully insured to self-funded. And then many view the fact that they got there, right? Okay, I left the fully insured safety net and now I'm self-funded. I'm done. Time to put it to bed. And versus, I think it's a spectrum, and that's just the starting point, right? So we've started there, and now we've moved down that spectrum over time. Again, going back to my comment around the levers that we can pull to move the needle on cost. Going, maybe bundled with one of the BUCAs as a start, but we can keep moving down the spectrum. And the further you move, I think the bigger or the better the outcomes you're going to achieve are going to be. And so I think that's part of the challenge too, is continually helping your clients move the needle and move down the spectrum of what you can do in a self-funded space.
No, absolutely. And so I see a comment in the items from Jay Booth. It says year 2 is really when you see the action, when you see the engagement, when the customer joins. Hilton, what would you say about that?
Everything that's been said, I agree with. I think that the biggest issue is the more you put in, the better the chance of success. The more you work it and keep your eye on it, you do. In year 1, you get a little benefit because there's the tail of claims coming in. So you get a nice little pop right when you start, but that can change towards the end. I think year 2 is where you've had a whole year of understanding it, and maybe now you're a bit more educated, and we are in our year 2, and I think we do understand better. But year 1, you know, it's the first time you've got the information, so the more you work it, I think the better the chance of success. Year 2, hopefully you fine-tuning that, and you know, and hopefully you have saved a little bit over the time, so you go in with a nice little feeling of success before you even start the year.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Kathy, why do you see some customers engaging, and then why don't some engage at all? What's the difference between the two?
I think it's the culture within the company. So if your company has made the shift from fully insured to self-funded, and did it with eyes wide open, and have engaged all the right people within their company to make that transition, and they work hand in hand with their TPA and their consultant, it moves forward as a good engagement, as a positive, and they'll reap the rewards. They'll feel the benefits, and they'll be a part of it. If they made the change and really, but really didn't make the change, is the way I'll say it, where they really just changed how they're funding their claims, but have not really delved in to understand what they're doing, may not have engaged all the right people within their organization. So if there's a disconnect, say, between the CFO and the HR team, or between the HR team and the employees, you know, then that won't move forward as quickly. You know, it still has the ability to get there, but it'll take longer, more education, more pushing to try to get that type of client to understand, you know, how you benefit from self-funded.
No, absolutely. Megan, you can hit the next slide. And as we advance to the next slide, it's like, you know, companies have, you know, typically taken 10 years to really transform and enhance their culture and do all these things that companies have really been able to do now over the past 22 months, right? People are ready. Everybody thinks that, you know, you've got to stay the status quo, that, you know, everybody wants the same thing. I think what people want, right? They want to pay as little as possible for healthcare. They want the highest quality. They want to understand, right? Education, right, is the most important aspect. And so those types of things are really able to be advanced when you have that type of data, as you all have referred to. And, you know, this is an interesting item that comes up on the screen, right? You know, what are the top concerns of the C-suite customer or prospects when making decisions for your group health plan? You know, you see 30% of the people say cost, about 20 say service and responsiveness, employer resistance, access to high quality doctors. We're the largest network. Hilton, where do you sit here?
So I'm a CFO, cost. However, I'm also a user of the service. So service and responsiveness and access to highest quality doctors are important to me personally because I use the system. But really, cost is the #1 driver of everything you do when you're going to make a change with your health insurance.
Yeah, no, we see that oftentimes. And Jeff, you know, is it cost? Is it value that you're hearing? Is it some of the other items that you see here? What do you think about Hilton's comments, and what are the feedback you connect, you know, with the people you're working with?
Yeah, I have to agree with Hilton. I think cost is at the top, but I do think it's a combination of a number of the others as well. So I can't disagree with it. I think employee engagement, which would fall under the employee resistance, is a big driver to the cost, certainly.
But if everyone's talking about cost, right, and if claims drive premium, right, you lower the cost of the claim, you lower the premium, then, you know, if those two items are just, you know, incredibly obvious, then why do you not see more people want to dig in and manage their plan like they manage the rest of their business? Rob, what do you say about that?
Well, I think in this particular instance, right now with everything going on with the Great Resignation, the devil you know is sometimes easier to work with than the devil you don't know. And if you change something and it creates a lot of disruption for your employees and friction, do you lose people that you can't afford to lose? Clients across the country right now are short-staffed and competing for talent like they never have before. And so it's sometimes easier, quite frankly, to just hit the easy button and stay with the thing that you know versus do the work and put in the effort to make that change.
Absolutely. No, great feedback. Thanks, all. And Megan, you mind hitting the next slide, please? And so if clients are fully insured, right, why do they choose to stay that way? This is interesting. The perception that there's too much risk if they go self-funded. 50% of the people said that, but yet 90% said that self-insurance is the way to go. The perception the company is too small to go self-funded, about 30. The perception the company can't tolerate potential volatility at about 15. And they like the comfort of writing one check. Jeff, what do you say to these folks?
I just think that too many people want to set it and forget it, right? And that's just, as we've talked across a lot of these, that's just not a recipe for stabilizing your costs, right? You've got to work at it. It's one of those things that just like running your business, you don't set it and forget it on your strategy, right? You're constantly evolving and tweaking, if you will, or adjusting to the market conditions.
Hilton, what do you say about this?
I think the biggest thing is fear of the unknown. People just, it's foreign to them because they for most of their working life, they've done the traditional. So I think one is fear of the unknown. And then the other one is, it's just easier to stay where you are and no one's going to come back at you because you've just done what's always been done. It is a leap of faith. And once you do it, it's not really, but you just don't know it when you're sitting in a situation and for 20 or 30 years, you've done the same thing. That was an easy fix. No one would come back at you. And it was you knew your population, it was a fixed cost. This is a little different. And I think that to me was the biggest, when we first talked about it a couple of years ago, just unknown and what if it goes wrong.
So Rob, you're out in the marketplace, you're talking with a 200 life group, a 500 life group, and you bring up, hey, listen, this is really the year to, look at alternative funding strategies, and you bring up the reasons why, and the client says, oh, you know what, we're just going to stay fully insured. Do you say yes and sit back, or do you push back a little bit? And if you do push back, what's the dialogue you're having?
Of course, we push back quite a bit, and I think what we hear from folks are that it's too risky. So we address that issue and show them some data. We have a Monte Carlo simulator that can run any iteration of what happens if versus fully insured and self-funded. And for a 100 life group in year one, you have over 70% chance of outperforming fully insured, and over a 5-year period, that number jumps up to over 90%. For a 500 life group, that number is almost 99% over a 5-year period of time. So how risk adverse are you really? I mean, even for a 100 life group, if you had a 7 out of 10 chance in Vegas when you rolled the dice on the craps table, I'm pretty sure you're going to do it. So we have that conversation. Sometimes people have had a bad experience. As we've talked about, not all self-funded plans and or broker consultants are created equal in this space. And so perhaps they had bad advice or a bad plan or bad setup that put them in a position to fail right out of the gate. And so many times we'll run into a CFO perhaps or a head of HR that remembers that vividly, even though it might have been 10 or 15 years ago. We also try to educate them on the fact that things have changed. The speed, for example, that claims are processed is very different than it was a decade ago. And that, something else we hear is, well, am I going to have to hire more people? Is this going to be more work than my fully insured plan? And lastly, I think you have some folks sometimes on the buying side that just are uncomfortable at best with their knowledge around their fully insured plan, and the idea of then going self-funded is something so unknown and complicated to them that it's too much to try to get their arms around. And so And that's where we try to walk our clients through an educational process around why, at a minimum, it's at least worth doing some serious due diligence to determine what is the best path forward. And then once we get there, if they agree with us that self-funded is in fact a better way to go, then helping them understand that this isn't like fully insured where we're just going to shop around every year. This is a strategy that we need to commit to for a multi-period of time. And if we do, as I saw a bunch of comments in the chat, year 2, year 3, year 4, this is when we will see the payoff and the dividends. And so you got to hang in there.
Right on. I mean, and Rob is with USI as a national practice leader in the mountain region. And so, Jeff, is Rob having those conversations at the C-suite level, or is he having it at the HR level? And if he's having it at the HR level, what do you think about that? Is that effective or ineffective?
Oh, absolutely. It's effective. That's the where you have to have those conversations.
Should it remain only at the HR level, or you really think that it's got to kick back up and absolutely include folks like Hilton as well?
No, I think it has to include folks like Hilton. I think it's good to include HR folks. Obviously, they're a big component of implementing a new strategy, but I think you've got to have it at the C-suite level.
No, absolutely. No, great responses, everybody. And Megan, would you mind hitting the next slide for me, please? And I believe, if I'm not mistaken, this might be the last slide. We're going to open up the floor to questions after this. It says, if guiding members to higher quality, lower cost providers positively impacts healthcare costs, why do you think it's slow for employers and employees to adopt these strategies? So almost 40% of the people said lack of understanding, 30, fear that employees won't be able to see the provider that their primary care doctor recommended. Disbelief, there's a large enough gap in provider cost and quality, right? 20%. And then the last is lack of education. Kathy, what do you think about this?
So I think it depends on what the service is that you're talking about. There are some items that it's more easy to get members engaged. The less that they have to do in changing their process. For example, if you're just sourcing their medication through a different source, it's an easy solution to engage the members because they don't have to do anything different. They get their prescription from their same provider. They're going to receive their medication in the same fashion, in the same package. So that's an easy engagement. If you're trying to direct members to, maybe have imaging services at a different facility, that's a fairly easy engagement as well. But when you start to get into services like different surgeries, knee surgery, back surgery, transplants, it becomes a much more personal situation. And, it's a process that's going to take a lot more education, engagement with the member, making it a more personal interaction with the right person to be able to accomplish that steerage.
So Hilton, Kathy talks about that steerage. Do you think your employees would be more inclined to steer to a higher quality, lower cost provider if, let's say, the deductible was waived? And if they didn't want to do that, they could still go to the same doctor they wanted to and, pay the same deductible that they were typically paying. What do you think about that, both the left and the right side of that?
So I think what Kathy said is correct. Certain things like x-rays, those things, no problem to get people to do it. The more involved the procedure, maybe not so much. And, a lot of the higher compensated employees, I think they like word of mouth. They want to go to who they know in their community. I think the biggest way to get this to work is education, but education is just the smallest part. You have to give a financial incentive to do it. That'll be in my experience. If you tell somebody, if you go here versus there, you'll eat 50% of your deductible. Now it means something to them, because if there's no real change, why? I'll go where I need to go. But if they've never had a need an orthopedic surgeon and now they need one, and they're going to look for one anyway, they're going to say, well, if I go here, I can save $1,000 or $1,500. I think that becomes meaningful. You know, personally, I have an orthopedic surgeon I've trusted for many years. I will forego that. But for people who don't have a provider they want and they're looking, I think having a financial incentive absolutely gets people looking and considering doing this.
Oh, I agree. And Jeff, how do you respond to pushback, if any?
Yeah, I mean, I think giving people the choice is important, because if they know they have the choice, but there's an incentive to go with a lower cost provider or setting, and you don't have to sacrifice quality to do it, I think that resonates with people, and they're just more inclined to maybe listen to a second opinion, for example, and consider another alternative.
Rob, what about you? What have you seen in this arena?
You know, I think I'd even argue that we should, in the education process with employees, perhaps we even table cost. Cost, according to CMS, there's about a 6x variability in cost depending on the procedure, but there's a 17x variability in outcomes. And I don't know about you, but I don't want to go to the doctor that's 17 times worse than the best doctor when it goes to a knee surgery. I also think we need to help people understand that just because a physician's good at knees doesn't necessarily mean they're good at elbows. And so helping people understand that we're not trying to drive you necessarily to the low cost, we're trying to drive you to the best outcome. And I think everybody can get behind that idea of, I want to go to the best for what I need as it relates to whatever procedure it might be. And I'm going to have better recovery time, reduced, readmission, infection rates, et cetera, all the quality standards that we use to measure quality outcomes. That's where I want to go. And by way of going there, then we will also see some of the cost savings and pick those up, because those high performing doctors tend to be the lower cost physicians as well. And I think if we can help folks understand and connect those dots and then give them the tools to find that information easily, we can start to get more employers to adapt this type of strategy.
I agree. So that, Kathy, this is where you come in. Talk about there's 3 items that I think make this the most effective, right? And it's really one word, which is 3 items, right? Education, education, education. How do you get over that hurdle?
Again, that is really getting to the right individuals at the client. So if you have a client who is 100% in, and they're engaged and they want to work with you, you can, if you work as a team, because they know their population, they know what, how to effectively communicate with their population. So they're going to help you with getting in the door and educating the individuals at their level, making sure that you're meeting them, where they are. So, but education is the key, really making sure that everyone understands how it works, who would be reaching out to them, why someone would be reaching out to them, who they reach out to for assistance or for direction. But really, doing that over and over again. The adage, say it once, say it twice, say it 3 times.
Absolutely. I mean, what I heard today, right? It's just about it's data analytics, understanding, optimization, right? The more you have at your fingertips, the more you can understand, the more you can do, and the more you can improve your culture, your workforce development. And, if you remain in a fully insured environment, I mean, next year, you're going to go through a renewal process and, ask your broker, right? You got your 20% increase, maybe it gets knocked down to 15, and, you're doing the same thing over and over again. This really allows, as I mentioned earlier, kind of to put a stake in the ground. And if you have 500 advisors around the country giving this kind of feedback, I mean, this is really telling. And so I think what we need to do really is help to close the gap. And so, Jeff, the feedback you shared, Rob, Kathy, Hilton, your frontline defense experience. I mean, you were sitting in the seat of these 500 advisors, customers, right? I mean, and, you hesitated at first, right? You stayed fully insured for many number of years, but then you finally dove in, and I can't even imagine you going back the other way, because you are, you have the control, the insight, and the flexibility that you desire. And, not only does it retain employees when you control healthcare expenses, it improves, I presume, right, valuation of your company, enhances your earnings. And so all of these things kind of come full circle. So, Megan, I'm curious, I know there's some other questions that came in, either direct or indirect. Anything you want to ask to the panelists before we cut out for the day?
Yes, thank you guys so much. We actually had a ton of activity in the chat, in the Q&A, and direct messages to myself. Before we dive into the Q&A, I just want to let everyone know we will be sending the slides. I know a lot of you requested them, but also remember, this was just a preview and a sneak peek. So the full survey launches in a few days. You guys are going to get it first. We also have an opportunity for advisors on the call to co-brand the survey, where we'll put your logo on the self-insured survey, and you can use it for your own educational opportunities and initiatives. So with that, Keith, I am going to dive into the Q&A. Are you guys ready?
Sure.
Okay, let me take a look in the chat box. Okay, this is a great question. Should I be taking a vendor partner with me to my renewals or my prospect meetings?
Rob, you guys ever do that?
We do that. Yeah, the short answer is yes, we do it. I think we try to do most of the educational process, and when it comes to perhaps a very specific strategy that we think the vendor is most suited to explain to our client or prospect, then we will have them participate in the meeting. If the question is coming from hey, I believe that the vendor, perhaps in this case, WellNet, just is going to be more experienced and technically sound at explaining self-funded, because I've had little self-funded experience, and I would most definitely say yes. You want to bring in the folks that know, so you don't set yourself up in a bad position.
Interesting. And then Hilton, what about you? Like, you've worked with your brokers for many number of years. Were you traditionally seeing, end user health insurers at the meeting as well, administrators in that meeting, or it was always the broker advisor?
It was generally the advisor. When we started looking at self-insurance, we wanted to have a TPA or somebody else come in, whoever was going to be the other partner, just so we could meet. And I think it was a nice thing to have, because you're hearing it from more than one person. And I think to Rob's point, they might have a slightly different viewpoint or a bit more knowledge. I think it's not a bad thing, maybe not at the initial meetings, but once you see it's going in the right direction, I think it wouldn't be a bad thing to do at all.
And it's interesting. One of the survey questions that was made available, right? I think it said 50% of the people never bring, an outside entity to the meeting, which, we understand, we see, we get. Jeff, what about you? What are you traditionally doing?
Well, in a self-insured arrangement with a lot of different vendor partners, I think it's always good to have the more sets of eyes you have on the data, the more perspectives you get. I just don't think it can hurt, but to Rob and Hilton's point, timing is probably paramount there.
Definitely. And I'm looking at a comment right here. It says from J Booth, we sell concept and then bring in the partner as needed. I think that's probably the right approach. Absolutely. Megan, are there others?
Yes. So another question that came in: what's the best time frame to bring up self-funded options to my clients? I don't want to lose the business, but I don't want another broker to bring it up and talk to them before me.
What do you think?
Now is the best time if it's a 1-1, because it goes to part of the education process with self-funding is about it being a strategy. And to have a strategy, you have to move past the standard, I think, fully insured renewal process, right? So depending on the size group, they show up 4 or 5 months in advance. They talk about what the renewal is going to be. They do their negotiation, or maybe it's a projection, and they come back 60 days later, here it is, and then you move on to open enrollment meetings to just try to put it to bed. And that really isn't a strategy, right? So starting now, especially if there's an education process that needs to be involved, of educating the value of self-funded, talking about the risks, how to manage it, how it works, that all starts now, so you can help get them comfortable, so they can say, yeah, this is something we really want to explore. And we want you to start doing the analysis today, so that hopefully you've gotten over that big hurdle of should we be fully insured or self-funded, and then you can just move on to what is the best self-funding strategy to implement for a 1/1 effective date.
Definitely. And then Jeff, what about you? I mean, like how often, how in advance are you talking about captives, with your customers, with your prospects?
We, to Rob's point now, I mean, the sooner the better, because it takes time, and that education curve can be longer with some buyers than others, right? We do find that with groups who have experience with captives, whether it's on the business insurance side of the house or in some other way, shape, or form, they get through the learning curve quicker. But in healthcare, there's a lot of moving parts. It's like a giant game of whack-a-mole, as I call it. So you can't start early enough with the
Definitely.
education.
And then Hilton, what about you? Like, when do you all begin to revisit your health plan renewal, both when you were fully insured, how many months prior, and then now that you're self-funded? What's the difference?
We were always late to the party. We were always like rushing at the end because we were never sure where to go. I think with the self-insured, it's a lot different now because we're not going backwards. So now we just, what's the renewal going to be? And it's a much easier thing. I think to the brokers on this call, sowing the seed is great. There's nothing like a really bad fully insured renewal to get people to want to make a change, because it is a little tough to make the change, but a really bad renewal can be a really good push to go in an alternative direction.
Terrific. And then Kathy, any cleanup? What do you think?
I'm with Rob. I think that the earlier you start having that discussion with the client, because there's other people they need to get engaged. You're normally probably having that discussion with the CFO. Yes, they're looking bottom line, looking at cost, but you need to get that HR and benefits team engaged as well. You need to dispel their fears, let them have an opportunity to get to know you. If you're bringing your partners at some point to the table, it gives them an opportunity to get to know them, get comfortable. It helps make that transition easier. And then you get the bad renewal on top of it from your fully insured. Makes it easier, much easier pitch.
Terrific. I heard today both, a lot of good data points, both that we collected, but also it's the feedback around it. And I want to thank you all, Hilton and Jeff and Rob and Kathy, for being so generous with your time and sharing your experience, your insight, and then also everybody, both CEOs, CFOs, and advisors that have joined us today. As Megan shared, right, we're going to distribute the self-insured survey shortly. In addition, we'll have a playback of this as well. And then if there are any questions, feel free to email partner@wellnet.com. And we've got Rob Pierce from USI, Jeff Maraschino from BevCap, and Hilton Share of Consolidated Credit, and Kathy Salmons of WellNet Healthcare, Megan as well from WellNet. Thank you all very much, and enjoy the rest of the week. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Thanks, Keith.
Thank you.
Thank you.